Good morning, everyone. Peggy West here, and we're getting ready to start our webinar on finding violations in the process here shortly. I want to say thank you for coming on, and all you new board members. This should be an eye opener on how to do this properly. So, managers, I appreciate you getting on as well, even though I know you get a credit, but you are taking the time to join us. So thank you, board members, thank you, sponsors, and property managers. We do have some housekeeping. Please put your questions into the question and answer. That's Q&A, questions and answers, not the chat box, please. We do record the Q&As and we give those to the presenter today is Dan Wasserstein, our attorney, giving the presentation. So if he can't get them all answered today, he will do a follow-up. Or if you want him to follow up, you can put it in that line as well. Everyone's information that is on today is going to be on a sponsor sheet that I will send out following the webinar. So if you want to reach any of these great sponsors today, they all have a great deal of experience in the industry. Reach out to them. The other thing I want to mention is to please allow Dan's team to give about maybe 10 days tops to get your credit posted, okay, with the DBPR, okay? All right, let me start with introducing our sponsors for today who invited you. I'm going to start with, I'm not sure if she's on, I don't see her here, but we do have Legacy Life Plan. She is Dahlia Anise. She is an attorney, and she will help you with anything to do with wills and trust issues. Next, I want to introduce Munyon. Munyon is a longtime statewide painting contractor, been in business about 70 years. They do cover the entire state. The rep for that is Shelley Rovner. She's from the East Coast, and Shawnee Haas is on the West Coast, and they will be on the sponsor sheet. Next, I want to have Daniel Baum introduce himself. He's with COA Solutions. He's a very active insurance broker. Daniel, tell us about yourself.
Thanks, Peggy. Good morning, everyone. Happy Friday. My name is Daniel Baum. I'm the founder of COA Solutions. We specialize in helping condos and HOAs throughout Florida, helping boards and CAMs navigate the insurance side of community association management. And while today's topic is about violations and the fining process, the common theme is risk management. And boards are constantly asked to make decisions that can impact the association's financials, and legally, and insurance is always a major part of that picture. For those of you who a major renewal date is tomorrow, the May 31. Today, many of you might be executing your documents that renew to make sure you get your renewals in for May 31st. Obviously, hurricane season starts on June 1st as far as the insurance business is concerned. And right now, we saw the property market is incredibly softer than it was the last few years. Most of my clients have seen double-digit premium reductions this year, and so should you. And if you're not, that's something to think about. At the same time, the casualty market, specifically on the D&O side, has gotten significantly tighter, as well as the umbrella side. And those premiums we've seen either go up or less carriers offering policies to our clients. So my role is to help communities understand both sides of that market, reducing unnecessary premiums where possible, and making sure boards are not finding out last minute that they're getting prices going up or that they're not getting a reduction when they should have. If your community has not had an independent review of insurance program recently, I'd be happy to be a resource to you. I know you're going to have a great day, great webinar today, and I wish you all a wonderful weekend. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Daniel. Awesome. Okay. Next, I want to introduce United Professional Engineering. Must have had an appointment or so, but the contact there is Siobhan Gonzalez. She is the business developer, but Carmelo Giglio has been in business over 25 years now. He is a very esteemed engineer in the state of Florida and has held two presidencies with the Florida uh, Structural Engineering Association. So if you need any help with engineering, he knows everything, and his firm is excellent and available all over the state. Next, I want to introduce Nicole Johnson Pendergrass. She is the managing partner and the operations manager for Hafer Company. Hafer is a CPA firm. And right now, as Daniel was mentioning, she's probably closing out a lot of condominium into the quarter taxes and so on. Let's move on to introduce Jamie Gelfand. Jamie is vice president with First Citizens Bank. Jamie, tell us about yourself and what's the bank doing these days?
Good morning, Peggy. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. My name is Jamie Gelfand. I'm the Regional Sales Officer at First Citizens Bank. First Citizens is a 125-year-old top 20 bank. I work in the CAB Community Association Bank Division, where we provide lockbox and loans to associations. We have API integrations with over 30 software. If you're working on any projects that you need financing for, we do not require you to move your banking relationship, which is a big help to most associations. So enjoy today's class. If I can provide you any information, I'll put my information in the chat.
Awesome, very good. All right, next I want to introduce Dylan Pena. Dylan is with PD Concrete. They are specialists in concrete restoration. So Dylan, tell us about yourself and your company.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Peggy. Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. So my name is Dylan Pena, and I'm the business developer here at PD Concrete Specialist. We've been serving South Florida for well over 20 years now. But, most importantly at PD Concrete Specialist, we specialize in concrete restoration, waterproofing, post-tension cable repair. We assist with the 40, 50, 60-year recertification process to ensure your property stays compliant with the law and structurally safe. One thing that does set us apart, though, is that we do not use subs at all. We only use our in-house employees, so all the repair work is insured and accountable. We operate out of 2 offices, with one in Aventura and one in West Palm Beach. If you have any questions, I'll be leaving my information in the chat box below. Have a good weekend, everybody, and thank you very much, Peggy.
You're welcome. Hello to your dad there.
Of course.
All right, next I want to introduce Velocity Services Group. Rick Hogan is the contact for the state of Florida. They are a large loss restoration company and based out of Houston, Texas, but they do cover mostly the state of Florida going up to North Carolina. So it's good to get their free service that they have. They'll come out and run a drone over your property, take a lot of pictures that you might need for insurance purposes after a disaster so that you can prove what you had and the care that you took for your property and have it ready for insurance or a public adjuster even. So take advantage of that free service. If you need anything, he will be on the sponsor sheet, or you can also reach out to me directly. Next, I want to introduce, we got Cameron on today, Cameron Andres from Best Roofing. Cameron, tell us about yourself and what's going on over there.
Morning, everybody. My name is Cameron Andres. I do business development at Best Roofing. We're a commercial roofing contractor based in Fort Lauderdale, servicing the entire state for the past 48 years. We do any and all kinds of roofing you might need. So we'll do single family home repairs and replacements, all the way up to big commercial properties, repairs, replacements, preventative maintenance plans for both sloped and flat roofing as well. We also do complimentary comprehensive roof audits, which might be a good idea as we get into hurricane season. We can get somebody on your roof, take some pictures, evaluate your current roof system, see if there's any repairs that need to be made immediately, as well as give you a life expectancy of your current roof and a cost estimate for what a re-roof might be when that time does come. So before we get into hurricane season, is a great time to do that. If you want to reach out, let me know. I'd be happy to schedule that for you. Enjoy the panel today, guys.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Great introduction. Okay, next I just want to mention Bob Aleka, Vice President for Community Services at Faster IO. He has an appointment this morning, but they are a streaming service. You need to look into it if you're not happy with your current cable or service, because you can take this service with you anywhere. You don't have to just have it at your property. But when you go away on your winter trips back home or however, talk to Faster IO and see how that service works. We also have the paving lady who's in appointments today. Dawn Miller is the contact. She is covering from Orlando now down to the southeast side of Florida for paving and restoration of your property for paving. Her number will be on that sheet. Then I want to move into Tom Acosta. He is the manager for APB Security. Tom, tell us about what your security services do and about yourself.
Morning, folks. My name is Tom Acosta. I'm with APB Security. So you can see, American Protection Bureau. We've been around for over 25 years, and we cover pretty much the Tri-County area completely. We go from our headquarters is in Jupiter, and we have the second office in Pompano. We do all types of security. Mostly we're a boutique type of security, which we customize everything, including the price, to your needs. We don't just generalize everything. And we do all types of security, patrols, security. We do schools, we do hospitals, we do everything under the sun as far as security is concerned, arm and unarmed. As you well know, that hurricane season is here already, and if your security company is not communicating with you, which it probably already has, you should have a good sit down with them, because this is a very critical time and a critical, if anything happens before or after or during, security should be very involved with you. So if you need any advice, any proposals, anything that you need related to security, please don't hesitate to call me. My name again, Tom Acosta, APB Security. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. All right. Next, I want to introduce Damaris Cabrera. She is the representative down here in South Florida, and I think for the state, right, Damaris, for Clarkson and Varick. So Damaris, tell us about yourself and the company, please.
Thank you, Peggy. Good morning, everyone. My name is Damaris Cabrera. I'm the Business Development Manager for Clarkson and Varick. We are an independent elevator consultant firm. We attend to the country. It's nationwide. What do we do? Super important. When I say independent, is because we don't touch the elevators. We are 100% on the owner side, bringing the expertise to help the owners to identify what are the challenges with the elevators. So many times, and it's quite often, that we see that the elevators fail, and the elevator company tells you, okay, it's gonna take weeks, and and you have no other option but to trust them. It's gonna take weeks, and it's gonna cost this much. And it's always somehow extra over your contract, right? So what we found is that it's an opportunity to help the owners. We need to support more the owners. There's nobody in the management teams and the board members, rare, that is gonna have the expertise. You open the elevator shaft and you're gonna see, what do you see? Is it dirty? But nobody knows really what is happening there. So our goal is to help, is to bring the light there and to be able to facilitate these conversations. What we encounter is that it's an opportunity. In many instances, the nature of the elevator contracts has changed so much, and the mechanics are spread so thin. So it's very unrealistic that they can spend the time in the buildings doing preventative maintenance. When we go there, then we ensure that the terms of the contract that you are entrusting, that is not being fulfilled, is fulfilled. So we document this, we have these conversations, and once the expertise comes into the room with the elevator company, they cannot fool you anymore. Also, we review those bills that they send you, all those extras, and we tell you, you know what, this is covered by your contract. And 8 out of 10 times that happens. So if you need to terminate because you're just fed up with the contract, we can help you even for early terminations. We can advise you, document. If you need to look for a new contractor, super important, is we go back to the level of expertise. If just asking the contractors to give you a proposal will never suffice. You know, you're at their mercy at what they see or what they want to sell. It's very important to have these negotiations early by somebody who has the expertise, right? That is on your side, that is going to protect you. There are some things that they're going to exclude. You don't know what is being excluded. You're just negotiating the low price as much as you can. And then later on, the bill comes. They see what is going to need to be replaced or repaired down the road, because all the elements, all the components don't last 25 years. And then when they comes a bill. And now you are tied by a contract, so you have to pay what they're telling you to pay. So when we're in this conversation, we can tell you, okay, that part is half of what they're charging you. The labor, they're asking for 40 hours, that work can be done in 20 hours and 16 hours, right? So all that is gonna always help you. So it's an investment to pay a consultant, and sometimes it's hard to see, but we'll always translate, and then your savings and your risk minimizes, and the performance of the elevators is gonna improve. So thank you. Peggy, I will
Absolutely.
set up my information.
Absolutely. So that's an awesome service. They are the best consultants recommended for the state of Florida. And with that, I just want to say that they are going to be offering my next construction summit class on June the 12th. They're going to give an entire webinar on maintenance. So maintaining your elevator is a way to really save costly repairs or unnecessary repairs. The next vendor sponsor I want to introduce is Southwest Elevators. Now, these people are the elevator installation company that would do the installation on your elevator and also the actual physical repair. So they work hand in hand with Damaris's company. They have 2 offices now located, one in South Florida and Fort Lauderdale area, covering the East Coast, and now they've moved up to a new office in Tampa, covering the Northwest Coast as well. So Southwest Elevator, the contact there is Brooke Cavender and her sister, Brandy Cavender, and they'll be on the sponsor sheet as well. Now, I do want to mention also or introduce Vinteum software. We have Laura on today. She's the international business account executive. And tell us about yourself and what Vinteum is doing, because you do a lot that keeps them in compliance.
Yes, that's correct. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much, Peggy. Thank you very much to all of you for being here with us today. So, my name is Laura. I am the sales executive here at Vinteum. So, what does Vinteum do? We're a company that has a really nice product, which is called Neigbrs. And Neigbrs is the one that will be the software that will provide you with a portal to manage your communities. So regardless if you are a self-managed community, if you're a board member, if you are a property manager, if you're a property management company, you can definitely go ahead and use our software to manage your community, to send out communication notices, to manage your service request, incidents, to even hold your online board meetings. And not only that, but we will also provide you and build your public-facing website. So none of you guys would have to, be a graphic designer at this point or know how to build a website from scratch. We will take care of that. We will take care of building the portal. And not only that, we will also train you guys as board members or as a property manager on how to use and navigate our system so you can, feel free from after our training to do, the customizing and editing on your own. And after that, you will have an ongoing support with us. So we will be, next to you throughout the way, throughout the path as a board member or as a property manager, giving you with the best tools. And actually, just recently, we launched a really nice and new product, which is called Neighbors Lite. It's basically our free version. And on this one, you would have a free website, and you can also build your portal with some limitations, but still will give you a lot of, things to try our products, to manage your community, to see it on your own. This is a chance for you guys to really try our product by yourself, take a look to it, and see how good and how easy it will be to use for any of you. So if anything, we'll be sending our information through the chat. And or you can also let us know through the chat if you're interested. I will personally reach you and answer to any type of questions you have. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. Awesome. And I think this is an awesome product, this newest and latest one, because if you are 25 units and under, You're probably thinking, oh, I don't need a website, but everybody needs a website these days. They're very helpful to put everything in the cloud and take advantage of that. But it is a law now. If you're a condo and have 25 units or more, you must have a website. So this is a great opportunity, both low volume or lower amount of units and more units to have a free website. Okay, with this, I want to get right into it. I'm going to turn this over to Ben Friedman. He is the president of Citiquiet Windows and Doors and today's moderator. Ben, I'm going to let you introduce yourself and also tell us about your company and then take it over to our presenter.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Peg. Thank you, Peggy. Thank you all for being here. My name is Ben Friedman. I'm the president and owner of Citiquiet Windows and Doors. We are a turnkey white glove installation company as it relates to windows, doors, storefronts, and railing systems, centrally located in Boca Raton with satellite offices in North Miami, Fort Myers, and Naples. So we do service the entire state. Enough about me. I want to introduce today's speaker. I guess what we're going to hear from Daniel Wasserstein today is that there really is a right and a wrong way to fine or impose violations within your community association. And the outcome of how you go about doing it could result in a positive outcome or a negative outcome for the association and the board. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Daniel Wasserstein, who is headquartered out of Boca Raton. He services all of South Florida, and in fact, he services the entire state. Daniel, we will turn it over to you. I only ask people to put their questions in the Q&A, not the chat. The chat is not monitored at all for questions. And Daniel is going to take it away, stop periodically to address any questions or concerns. And it's all yours, Daniel.
Okay. All right. Thanks for the introduction. My name is Dan Wasserstein. I'm a community association attorney. We serve primarily Palm Beach and Broward County, but we serve all the counties. We have clients everywhere across the state. All we do is exclusively represent associations. It's 100% of our practice. We don't represent contractors, vendors, management, banks, unit owners, tenants, or anyone else, only associations. And we've never done any marketing. We don't do trade shows or advertising or anything. All of our clients are word of mouth, referral based. And I know I see some people in the room already who are clients, existing clients, people I've worked with in the past. So it's nice to see some familiar faces. Today, I'm going to put the presentation up. We're going to go through the fining and violation procedure. I'm going to explain to you some of the underlying aspects of what we fine for and how that works. And then I'm going to take you step by step through the procedure of how you properly levy a fine against an individual. So let me go to share. Okay, and from the beginning. All right, Peggy, is it looking good on your end? Okay. All right, everyone. So, again, my name is Dan Wasserstein. My contact information is there. This course is called the Violation and Fining Process. It is for 2 CEU credits for property managers. And I'm going to try to go through this as efficiently as we can. And occasionally I'll stop and ask, and we'll take a few questions from the Q&A. So to begin with, each unit owner, tenant, and guest are governed by and have to comply with certain things that most all of us are familiar with. Florida statutes, the declaration of covenants, if it's an HOA, or declaration of condominium, if it is a condominium. And of course, also the declaration if it's a cooperative. The bylaws, which all associations have, that's what govern more of your procedure as to how you run meetings and notice meetings and things like that. And then finally, your rules and regulations. I don't include the articles of incorporation because almost never do they contain things that owners or residents or tenants are going to be violating. The articles are usually just a statement of how the corporation was originally formed and its corporate purpose and those sort of things. So anyway, these are the things that everyone has to comply with. Now, when we delve a little deeper, the things that the association is going to be enforcing, which can include these and of course include other things, but these are the main things amongst the statutes, the governing documents that the association usually runs into the most as far as things that people violate. The first are architectural standards and alterations. So, a lot of times it'll say that an owner can't reconfigure the layout of their condo unit, or an owner can't build something on their lot on their HOA, or add something to their home, or change the appearance without architectural approval. And a lot of times people do these things without approval, or they put things in, they're unacceptable. And that's one thing that we see is a common enforcement item. Of course, pet restrictions. We see a lot of pet rules that are either no pets allowed, or they can't be over a certain size or a certain weight and things like that. And again, that's something that we see a lot of enforcement action on. And, of course, that then dovetails into support animals, emotional support animals, service dogs. That's not the topic of our conversation today. That's a whole class in and of itself. But, pet restrictions are things that we see clients run into from an enforcement perspective very often. Restrictions on leasing and sales, and other very popular, I should say common violation, where people are either selling or leasing their unit without association approval. And then the questions are, well, how do we enforce against that? And one way you can enforce against that is fining. Parking and vehicular restrictions, people park vehicles they're not supposed to have, or they park a vehicle in a place they're not supposed to park it. Again, very common restriction that we see regularly enforced, and often enforced through a fining process. And finally, nuisance and noise complaints. That's when people are sort of, we have neighbors that are screaming and yelling, or they're playing instruments, or their television excessively loud, or they have someone living there who's just making a lot of noise. These are things that associations deal with, often through fining as a means of enforcement. So those are the things that we see most commonly amongst the governing documents as far as restrictions that people violate. So now we talk about enforcement. And, when these things happen, the association through the board has a duty to address them. And it's important in this slide to see the word. It says the responsibility of uniformly enforcing the governing documents. And that word uniformly is very important, because it's uniformly across the board as to who you're enforcing against, how quickly you enforce, and all of that. Because as we'll talk about later, there are a lot of defenses people can raise to these fining actions. So when you're enforcing your documents, whether it's through fining or legal action or suspensions or anything else, you really need to make sure that it's done uniformly to avoid some of those potential defenses we'll discuss later. And in fact, as you'll see towards the end, when we do talk about the defenses, the failure to enforce in a timely manner can result in the waiver or forfeiture of your enforcement rights. So again, not only uniformly enforcing, but timely enforcing is very important. Now, the condo statute, where is this found? This law that we're about to discuss and this procedure, it's found in the condo statute in 718-303. And that's where it says the association broadly has the power to fine an owner and these other individuals for violations. But it also says here, as you see on the slide, the position that the authority arguably doesn't have to be in the governing documents, because the way the statute is worded. It used to be worded to say, if the authority exists in the governing documents, then you have the power to fine, et cetera, et cetera. That preamble was taken away. So now it just says an association can fine. So there's an argument that you can fine without having the language. And again, I won't go into the legal aspect of that, because what I'm going to tell you is have the language somewhere, even if it's just the board votes it to put it in the rules and regulations, so that when someone says, show me that you can fine me, that you can use that authority in the statute against me to fine me, if you at least have it in your rules and regulations. I find it very powerful when people ask that question and you can show it to them in print, black and white. Oh, here it is right here. It says, in addition to all other remedies, the association has the right to fine individuals for violations. That can be very powerful in convincing them that power exists. And it's also very helpful later on if you ever have to justify or legally support your right to fine. So very important to have that. The HOA statute's similar in this regard as to the language and making sure that it's in at least your rules and regulations, the authority to fine. And I will say 720-305 is the section of the HOA statute that governs fining. So again, if you're ever looking for that authority, that is the section you want to go to. Now, before we go into the process, actually, now, we've talked about the underlying stuff. I'll send it back to Ben and say, are there any applicable questions that we can maybe hit on now before we go to the next step?
Yeah, sure. So one question is just very general. Will these slides, are you willing to share these slides that Peggy can send out?
Oh, yeah, of course. No, they're absolutely not. Yeah,
Okay.
of course, man. Come on. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Whoever needs it. Whenever I do these seminars, I always share the slides. So yeah, they'll be available. What I'll do is I'll email the PDF version of it to Peggy, and then she can disperse it through whatever medium she goes through.
Okay, thank you. So that answers one question. Some of these are kind of specific and you haven't hit on them yet, but
Okay.
I'll ask it and then you can tell me if you're going to cover it or you want to address it. So here's a question. An owner has agreed that they violated our leasing rules and would cease and desist immediately. 1 week later, they still had illegal tenants. We want to fine them $500 since they continue to violate for at least 10 days past their assurance of immediate compliance. Can we fine them $500?
You can fine them up to $100 a day, unless your documents allow for more, up to $1,000. So you can't fine them just a $500 lump sum for one instance, but because it's a leasing violation, it's continuous and it's been more than 5 days, they could assert a fine of, let's call it $50 a day for the 10 days. But they do still have to go through the process we're about to discuss to properly levy that fine. There's no such thing as an automatic fine or an immediate fine. So yes, the dollar amount sounds like it's feasible, but it still requires going through the statute. And depending on whether it's a condo or HOA, they'll see that the outcome, if the owner resolves that leasing issue before the end of the process is completed, it's different now in HOA versus a condo. And that's about, part of the process we're going to just be describing. But the answer is yes, if the process is followed.
Okay. There's a lot of questions. Everybody loves free legal advice. So I'm just going to pick and choose one or two more and you can keep going and then we can answer them all at the end if that's okay.
Yep.
So can a board vote to rescind an owner's rights if they fail to pay their maintenance fees and special assessments?
Yeah, you can do that. That's a different provision. There's another provision of both statutes that allow for, because what we're talking about today are non-monetary violations. When people owe money, if they owe money for more than 90 days, without going through the process we're describing for non-monetary, the board can just hold a meeting, vote to suspend those people until they bring their debts current, and then send them a letter, and then the suspension of amenity use rights goes into effect right away. They can't fine them for owing money, but they can suspend use rights, and they can suspend voting rights too. And again, that's a different process than what we're discussing today. It's a lot simpler when it's a money issue. And again, it's just a board vote followed by a letter. And then up and until that person brings their debt current, they would have their rights suspended.
Okay, I'm going to give you one more and then I'll let you keep rolling. So, question is, do we have authority to fine for, it's a little complicated here, but what it looks like is do we have authority to fine for speeding over the posted speed limit?
Yeah. I mean, you do. My own HOA where I live, it has installed cameras all over the place, and we're getting fining letters in the mail. I will tell you, you can fine for speed limits, but you do have to have reliable equipment, because if people contest it, relying on an eyewitness, I mean, unless it's really excessive speed or there's multiple eyewitnesses, it's speed is somewhat of it's an objective thing when you have the proper equipment to gauge it. But we find often that when people say someone was speeding, someone can see a car and say, oh, they were going 20 miles an hour, and someone else says they were going 40 miles an hour. In my own HOA, a lady posted on our Facebook page that someone was going 80 miles an hour down the street, down the main road of our community. And it's like, there's no way that someone was going 80 miles an hour. So it's very hard to support that if someone contests it, unless you have the proper equipment, and you should still be going through a fining process, that we're about to discuss. It's not just an automatic fine, but it would go through the process, and that's the most proper way of handling that.
Awesome. All right, so I'm going to let you keep going. Just one more time from a housekeeping standpoint, please. The only questions that will be answered will be in the Q&A. I see people asking questions in the chat. Unfortunately, we can't go back and forth. So if your question's in the Q&A, it will be addressed. If it's in the chat, it's something you're going to have to speak with Dan offline about. So I do appreciate that. Dan,
I just want to tell everyone, I know there's, just so everyone's aware, the extent of the question and answering is only in today's presentation. So emails and calls after this, I'm happy to talk to anyone about representing their community, but I don't want it to be put out there that there's free legal advice that goes beyond this gathering today. But I am happy to answer as many questions as I can today. And of course, any associations that want help, that want to hire us to help them, will absolutely help them. But today, in this presentation, and after, that's your time for your free legal advice.
Thank you, Dan.
Yep. All right. So we're going to go now into the actual process. All right. So we have this underlying information now that we understand what people get violations for, what we should have in our documents to allow us to fine people. Okay, well, now how do we do it? So it starts out with a violation is brought to the attention of the association by someone. Often it's management who maybe are doing rounds in the community, or they just happen to be aware of something. And then sometimes unit owners will bring it to the attention of the board or to management. Sometimes it's tenants, committee members, whatever. Whoever it is, they bring information to the office, let's call it, or to the association. And it's important that when brought that information, gather as much about the circumstance as you can, because like I gave in that example about the woman in my community that said someone was going 80 miles an hour, we have to make sure we're vetting these violations. We don't want boards or management to send letters to people for things that don't exist or that are excessive or hyperbolic to the point of not being possible. So, we want to make sure that we're doing a little bit of investigation to verify a condition exists or circumstance before we just take one person's word for it. Of course, if you have multiple people complaining about a similar thing, that gives you more support. But you want to make sure that you do some due diligence. And once either the manager or the board, whoever's sending notices, determines that there is merit to this violation, then a notice is usually sent to the offending party, identifying their behavior that is inappropriate or the condition that is in violation. And usually it'll also identify the covenant or the restriction that specifically speaks to that violation. I also recommend, if you can, if it's like a maintenance issue type thing, or a parking thing, something that you can photograph. If you're like, let's say, the manager, it's always a good idea and get a photo, include it, because then that person can't say that violation didn't exist. If you have a photo in the letter that's embedded in the letter, it's very hard for that person to then say, oh, that wasn't me, or that wasn't, or my house, my driveway's clean, or my car wasn't parked there. It's always good to do that. So that's the first part of this process. Now, if the violation is the nature that it is continuous as opposed to a one-off, you can give that person the opportunity to cure. So when you send them that letter, that warning letter, and this is very common with associations, you can say, hey, you have 30 days to rectify this issue. And that's common that associations give one, at least not two, of those warning letters before they escalate to the fining process. Because after all, the goal of the fining process is to get compliance. It's not to raise money. It's to get the community looking good, people acting and behaving the way they should, and operating the community in accordance with the documents. So if people are given an opportunity to fix a problem, a lot of times people didn't even know it existed. So it's always good, but you don't have to do this. You don't have to give a cure letter. You don't have to give a warning. You can just go right to the next step we're about to discuss after this, which is the start of the fining process formally. But you can give the warning letter, and I recommend you do. Now, to the second bullet point here, if it is not a continuous type of violation, meaning it's something that happened and it's over, like they let the dog out without a leash, and 5 minutes later, the dog came in the house, or they parked, a car for an hour illegally or something like that. Those things happen and they're over. Or let's say they had a party that woke up all the neighbors till 4 a.m. That party's over. It's not happening anymore. So if it is a non-continuous item, or it's a violation that remains uncured for a continuous violation after the time you give them from a cure letter, now we go to the next step, which is the board meeting to determine if they're going to levy a fine. And this is really the first formal step. So again, it's either a one-off thing that happened that you want to take some punitive action against that person for, or it's an ongoing issue that they haven't resolved. The real step one is board meeting to levy the fine. And a lot of times we get asked, well, can we just delegate the authority and let the manager do it? No, the way the statute is worded, it says a fine levied by the board, and then it says, et cetera, et cetera. How does a board levy a fine? At a meeting. So it's important to understand that the board needs to do this. It needs to be the one that levies the fine and sets the dollar amount. And it's not sufficient to just, some clients have said, well, Dan, we have a list of charges that for these different things, it's 100 for this and 50 for that. So can't we just skip the board meeting? And the answer again is no. It's a great idea to have what I call a menu of charges so that you have uniformity. And you remember from the beginning of this conversation, I said it's important to have uniformity here. That's another element of it. So that list of charges of standard amounts makes sure that the board is charging people the same thing for the same violation, but it doesn't mean that menu replaces the board actually issuing and levying a fine against someone. It's just a guide for how they do that. So again, first step, board meeting. It needs to be properly noticed. Fining is on the agenda. I do advise putting lot numbers or unit numbers under the fining item for the agenda as who's going to be fined, because by case law, the minutes of the meeting do need to identify who was fined. So you got to make sure your minutes are accurate, and you ideally want it to be on the agenda. In the meeting, for some degree of privacy, instead of using people's names, you can use lot numbers, account numbers, things like that. But you do have to hold the board meeting. Now, an important note here, when you're considering fines as a board, under new laws from 2 years ago, An HOA cannot fine or suspend use rights for an owner leaving garbage receptacles out either a day, meaning 24 hours ahead of pickup time, or 24 hours after. So we've had clients that either punished people for putting the trash cans out early, or allowing them to be out, until the evening, let's say, of the trash day. And no longer in an HOA can a fine be accrued to someone after going through the process if they only left their trash cans out either 24 hours before or after. Also, holiday lighting in an HOA. If decorations are left out beyond the time that's allowed for in the governing documents, before a fine in this process can be assessed against someone, they have to be given a written notice, and they have an additional 1 week to remove their holiday decorations before the board can consider fining them for having them out for too long. So even if your documents say the Christmas lights have to be brought in after January 10th, and you're on January 30th, and they still haven't brought in the Christmas lights, you still would have to give them another 1 week under written notice to bring them in before you can start pursuing a fine against them. And that's only HOA, not condo. This does not apply to condos. So, let me go back here. So the board meeting that's held is a normal board meeting. It's held on 48 hours notice with fining as an agenda item. And that's the meeting where the board decides the amount of the fine and determines whether it's going to impose that immediately. Sometimes boards will, again, maybe giving someone another chance. But again, they want to have uniformity. So you really don't want to make it too subjective in that regard. So usually it's just the board levying the fine and deciding the dollar amount. Now, once the board's levied the fine and determined the dollar amount, it goes to the fining committee for their final approval or disapproval before it's actually imposed. And that requires a 14-day advance notice. And that's for the owner to be, or whoever it is, to be aware that, okay, the board's levied a fine against me, but before they're going to impose it on me and actually make it due, it has to go through another step. And that's a step where I can show up and state my case as to why I think they shouldn't, the committee should not approve the fine that the board levied. And you'll just notice here again, a nuance for HOAs. The meeting, the HOAs, the meeting has to be within 90 days of the notice. Again, you're sending a 14-day notice. So I don't think you're going to do a notice for a meeting to be held, in 6 months from now. But just a nuance to be aware of. So we've talked about, okay, board holds the meeting, levies the fine. Now the owner has to be noticed of a fining committee meeting. The role of the fining committee is strictly to approve or reject the fine that's levied by the board. They cannot modify it, the dollar amount, the timing. It's just a yes or no approval or disapproval. If the fining committee does not approve the fine exactly as it's levied by the board, the fine cannot be imposed. If the fining committee does approve the fine, then the association has to provide the individual with notice of the fine, either by mail or hand delivery. And it's important to also note that this fining committee, they can only be comprised of individuals who are not board members or anyone who are directors, officers, employees, family members of board members or of any of those individuals. So, they truly want the people who are on the fining committee to be members of the community who are not associated with the board in some direct or familial manner, because they truly want that fine, that committee, to look at it with a fresh set of eyes. And I'm pretty sure, I would hope, like if, let's say my wife was on the fining committee, if I levy the fine as part of the board, there's a potential bias. My wife is going to rubber stamp what I and the other board members decided. So again, that's why we want that group of individuals to be as impartial as we can get them to be. Now, if the committee doesn't approve the fine, it cannot be imposed. And I mentioned in the prior slide that there's a letter that has to be sent out after the committee makes their decision. And in a condo, whenever that letter is sent, the fine is not due until 5 days after that letter. So once the the association says, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Unit Owner, you were fined by the board, the committee approved it, this fine is now, owed. It's not considered due and owing technically for another 5 days from that letter. So it should not be put on their ledger or be considered a debt until 5 days further. Now, in an HOA, when it comes to that letter, you have to send that letter within 7 days of the committee meeting. And instead of the fine coming due within, after 5 days, the fine doesn't become due until 30 days later. So again, HOA is a lot more extra time here and obligation. Now, importantly, and this is the newest, one of the most important changes of the statute from 2 years ago for HOAs, and one that I find to be a very disfavorable change, is that if the violation is cured before the committee hearing, or even after, within the 30 days of that determination letter notice that, where you're telling the owner, hey, you've been fined and it's been approved, at any point in that window of time in this whole process, if that HOA owner resolves the violation, if it's a curable type, like let's say a maintenance issue, the entire fine goes away. Which to me, the intention is the legislature looks at it like, well, the goal is compliance. So if they comply, we'll make the dollar amount go away. But my thought is the deterrent is the fine. So yeah, maybe they fixed it, but if they make the whole association, the board, have a meeting and letters and a committee meeting, just to then, say, okay, I painted my house, or I planted the bush that was missing, they can drag that out. And now the deterrent, which was the money out of their wallet for doing so, goes away. So yes, it gets compliance, but the deterrent goes away. I don't think this is a great addition to the statute. A lot of my colleagues agree with that. I think it marginalizes the effectiveness of fining for HOAs, but it is what it is. One thing I will say, that one of the questions we get all the time is, well, what about things that happen and are over? Like someone parks illegally, but then an hour later they move the car. Does that mean we can never fine them because they always cure the violation? Like, let's say a dog off a leash. No one's letting their dog run off their leash for months on end. It happens, it's over. My colleagues and I generally are of the mindset that those types of violations that occur and they're not cured, but they just come to a natural conclusion, you can still fine for those. Because otherwise, those examples I just gave, if those are considered to fall under this provision, that the violation was cured, you could never fine for things like, the dog off a leash or temporary parking violations or things like that. So I don't think that this new law rationally applies to that, but it is written in a way that's not ideal, I will say. So anyway, just something to be mindful. That is for HOAs. That doesn't apply to condos. If the fine is levied in a condo and it's approved by the committee, it's owed, and it doesn't matter whether they fix the problem or not, they still owe the money. Also for HOAs, if there's any attorney's fees that were incurred in connection with the violation and fining process, those cannot be assessed against the owner until the time passes for correcting the violation, meaning the 30 days from the final letter expires. Ben, let's take a pause there. Are there any questions?
Well, I got 56 questions. So,
okay, so I think what we should do is maybe, let's take a few at a time, and then we'll do as many as we can at the end.
You got it.
And go from there.
So let's go with one as follows. Our biggest issue is residents not getting prior written approval for exterior changes. The obvious cure is to remove the change, which some are simple and some are not. Other than remove the unapproved change, what do you feel about retroactive approval? And do we still notify a violation and hold the hearing and fine them for the time it took to cure as retroactively approved?
If I have clients all the time that will retroactively approve things, things that are violations. I think it's a reasonable way of running a community. If you're gonna retroactively approve them, it's up to you whether you want to fine them. A lot of times it's sort of a compromise that, hey, look, we can force your hand here and make you totally undo something, but we're willing to retroactively approve it, but you're going to have to pay a fine so as not to create a precedent or something like that. So there can be some negotiation there. But again, it's really the sentiment of the community and how rigid you want to be. I mean, obviously, if someone's a repeat offender, you're probably not going to give them the benefit of the doubt, but something where someone truly didn't know. We've had people put in driveways for $20,000-$30,000 that were permissible, but they never got approval. And we could tell them, hey, you got to rip out the whole driveway. It was never approved. But the more rational way of handling that is, look, go through the retroactive approval. You're going to get fined X amount of dollars. And, that's one way of handling it.
Okay. How do you collect fines for someone that hasn't paid if the fine is less than $1,000 because there are no lien rights?
Yeah, so it's less than 1,000. That's about where we're about to go right now on the current slide. The only way to collect that money is to file a lawsuit, which almost no one wants to do because it's a money judgment you would get. It's not a lien. Doesn't mean you can foreclose the home, which is the real teeth of collection in associations, is the threat of someone losing their home if they don't pay. But for fines that are under 1,000, you can't use that lien and foreclosure power. So that means if you file a lawsuit, you're ultimately asking a judge to give you a piece of paper that says they owe the money, which great, then you have to collect on it. I never see clients, and I don't encourage clients to sue for that type of debt. What we more commonly see and how these things get paid when people don't voluntarily pay them, because let's say they don't want to lose their use rights or something like that, is when they sell their home. When they sell the home, it goes on the estoppel certificate as a debt that's owed, and that's where we a lot of the time see these fines get paid.
All right, I'm going to ask you a couple shorter ones here. Is it true that an HOA must have a grievance committee before they can impose fines?
It's not they need it before they impose it. It's they need to have a fining committee, grievance, whatever you're going to call it. They have to have a committee to impose fines because, as you just saw, it's a two-step process: board meeting and committee meeting, and it can't be just one or the other. So now, but that doesn't mean that an association can't threaten to impose a fine without having a committee formed, because they can say, hey, if you don't do this thing, we're going to fine you. Without having a fining committee, because they can always form one later. So that's something we tell our clients, we counsel them on, is you can threaten it, but you can't follow through unless you actually have the committee.
All right, let's do one more. Let's see. Can we enforce HO6 if it's only in rules and regulations?
I'm sorry, what? Enforce what?
HO6.
Oh, HO6. No, so for HO6, for those who know, that's a insurance policy for basically usually for condominiums. You can only force owners to have an HO6 policy if it's in the governing documents. And generally, being in the rules and regulations is not enough. That needs to be something the members vote on and require. But if you do that, and we've done that for some of our clients, then people have to have that policy. And if they don't, one of the punishments is you could fine them for it.
Got it. All right. I mean, I can go on forever, so I'll let you keep rolling. And when you're done, you and I can look at these questions together because they're in front of you also and see which ones you've addressed and or want to address.
Sure. All right. Keep it going here. So now we've gone through the process. What can you do with the fine? Well, we just talked about it can't be a lien if it's under $1,000 ever. And only if it's $1,000 exactly or potentially more. can it be used in an HOA as a basis of a lien, which is really gives it more teeth. But if it's $100, $500, it can never be a lien. And in a condo, no matter how much a violation gets a fine for, an owner gets fined for it, it can never ever be a lien, which again takes a lot of teeth out of it. And we just kind of had that discussion. What else can you do with it? Well, the board can suspend access to common elements and common amenity areas and voting rights. If anyone becomes 90 days past due on paying a fine. So once you've gone through the whole process, another 3 months later, if that person still owes the fine, you can vote, the board can vote to suspend amenity rights, suspend voting rights, and you do that at a board meeting with a follow-up notice. Additionally, anyone who owes a fine or any other monetary obligation in an HOA is ineligible to be a candidate for the board. In a condo, it's only if they owe an assessment. So a fine, if they owe it, they can still run for the board. But in an HOA, they can't run for the board if they owe a fine. And then in either association, anyone who is on the board can't have any debt owed at all for more than 90 days, or they're considered to have abandoned their seat. So again, these are some of the ways that owing the money for a fine starts to potentially hurt those people if they really want to participate. But I'll be honest with you, I find that most people who have fines and refuse to pay them are not the type of people that are going to care very much about their voting rights being taken away, or they can't run for the board and things like that. They're usually people who are not interested in any of that anyway. But taking away amenity use rights and things like that can be successful. And okay, so we're going to do that. What are the things we normally would take away? The pool, the gym, the laundry room, the clubhouse. Those are good amenities. They're important amenities. Realistically, is it hard to sometimes police those suspensions? Yes, because if that person shows up and someone else lets them into the gym, let's say if it's locked and someone else just opens the door for them, who's policing that person's using the gym? It's a tough thing to police, but nevertheless, you can suspend those rights. The things you can't suspend are common areas used to provide access, means of ingress and egress. Now, in that regard, sometimes we'll see HOAs like to turn off transponders, so it forces the resident to go through the guest lane. I will say that without going into the detail of the law, it's a highly effective way of getting fines or other debts paid, but it's also considered controversial based on the language of the law. Another thing you're not allowed to do is cut off utility service to the unit. Now, some arbitrators have deemed that to include cable TV, and in more recent times, internet. I mean, especially internet after COVID. If they have internet, let's say through Hotwire, your community has bulk or Comcast. Sometimes like Hotwire, I use them because I know if someone owes money, an association can call Hotwire and say, hey, turn off the internet to unit 202. Now, again, just like the prior example, it's a highly effective remedy because people certainly will be very upset about that. But it's also controversial because the law is kind of looking at internet, even more so than television, as more of now a utility and something we rely on, especially where, people are working over the internet. And then some people, if they have a landline, a lot of landlines are internet-based. My entire office are VoIP phones. They're internet-based services. So if, let's say, I'm an elderly person and I rely on a landline for 911, and I pick up the phone, and because I owed a fine of $100, they turned off my internet, which means they turned off my landline, and I can't dial 911. That's where some potential issue comes in. But again, highly effective because people definitely hate not having internet or television. And then other things you can't suspend because someone owes a fine or other monetary amounts are their vehicular or pedestrian access to and from the parking lot, and you can't take away their parking spaces. Now, if voting rights have been suspended, it's important to know that their vote is not considered at all in the math of determining a quorum or calculating a vote. Drops out of the equation entirely. And then there's just some other information there about in a condominium, If you want to suspend voting rights, just some other qualifiers there for it. But again, we're talking about all these different things you can do, to help. And now we're going to get to the last slide before we take some of the final questions. And this is the most important slide of the whole presentation: defenses to enforcement of fines. The first one, I'm sure you've all heard this term before: selective enforcement. Selective enforcement is, there's a body of law that says an association can't treat one owner more favorably or less favorably than another. So in the context of violations and fines, the answer is, well, you let so-and-so do this thing, so you're selectively enforcing by not allowing me to do it. Or you let them not do something when you're requiring me to do it. However, for all of you to know, when you're faced with that, there's some ways to rebuff that. The first is sameness. The law requires apples to apples. So if someone says, you let that person park an illegal truck on the property, and you shouldn't be able to fine me for not fixing my landscaping. Those are apples and oranges. So unless they're pointing to someone else that's gotten away with a landscaping violation, they can't use another different unrelated type of violation to say, well, you can't enforce against me. The second is recency. We once, in a 55 plus community, we had a lawyer and an owner try to defend allowing a 30-year-old to live there by herself on the basis, they said, selective enforcement, because 21 years prior, the association had let a 39-year-old live in the unit by themselves. And of course, the law says, yeah, that is not sufficient for a selective enforcement argument because it's not recent enough. So if you have people pointing to ancient history, that's not going to fly either for them to be able to argue selective enforcement. And finally, knowledge. The association has to be aware of another violation that they're not enforcing against for the owner now to say selective enforcement. So what do I mean by that? Well, in the context of, let's say someone gets a violation and a fine for building an oversized patio in their backyard, and they say, well, you're selectively enforcing because my neighbor down the street built a big patio 2 years ago. Well, let's say that property is fenced in and we have no way of knowing of it until now. They can't rely on selective enforcement because the association had no knowledge of this other person's violation. And in those instances, we say, thank you very much. We'll let your neighbor know that you're the one that told on them, and they're going to get a letter now too, so we're not selectively enforcing against anyone. Of course, we don't usually say the first part, but we do enforce against those other people because that knocks out the selective enforcement argument. But if there is sameness, if there is recency, and if there is knowledge, like if it's something that's open and obvious, an owner can make a selective enforcement argument against a violation or a fine. And you want to be mindful of that. That's why I said at the beginning, again, importance of uniformly enforcing. The next two, waiver and statute of limitations, are really related to one another. Waiver just means you've kind of sat on your hands for a while. So people will say you waived your right to enforce. And a lot of governing documents will have a provision that we call a savings clause that says any failure to enforce a provision is not a waiver. And even the case law would provide the same. And that's really where we get to statute of limitations, where you have 5 years to enforce against a known violation of the documents. So if a waiver has gone so long with knowledge that it goes beyond 5 years, the owner has a statute of limitations defense that if the association seeks to enforce against them by a fine or legal action or anything else, they can say, hey, yeah, you know what? I admit I have this problem or I committed this violation, but you've known about it for 10 years and you didn't do anything. So too bad, statute of limitations, and that's my defense. And that is an absolute defense. So it's something for associations. If there are violations, they need to act on them. And the number one defense that we see are procedural missteps. As you can see from the process, and especially for HOAs, there's all these timelines and things you have to do. When owners are represented by lawyers, we often see them ask for, they say, send us the notice of the board meeting, send us the minutes of the board meeting where the owner was fined, send us the notice and the minutes of the committee meeting, send us the content of those notices. And if anything in that process is off at all, the case law is very specific that explicit and exact compliance is required. So if the board gave 13 days notice instead of 14 days notice of the committee meeting, the entire fine is invalid. If they fined for more money than legally allowed, the fine is invalid. If they didn't properly reflect the fine in the minutes of the board meeting, fine is invalidated. If they, did not have a committee meeting with 3 people present from the committee, fine's invalidated. If one of those people on the committee is not a permissible member of the committee, fine's invalidated. So again, these are things that especially lawyers for homeowners are looking for. And it's the number one reason why sometimes we have to tell clients, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to let the fine go. And with that, look, I will say fining, as you can see, there's a specific process to it. It is sometimes, in all honesty, some clients see it as the reward isn't worth the risk, or rather the juice isn't worth the squeeze. It's a lot of work. And especially now for HOAs where people can get away from the fine by just curing the violation, it's a lot of work, and you have to feel like it's valuable, because we've had some instances where people get fined and they just pay the fine and they don't fix the problem. So again, you have to see if fining works for you. I find the best value of fining is the immediate response, not actually even going through the process, but the threat of a fine is really the most valuable thing. I can tell you, my own wife, months ago, we got a notice that said we had coconuts on our trees that need to be removed. And if we didn't do so within 30 days, we may be subject to fining. And she called me, or told me at the end of the day, hey, I got this letter. I called the landscaper. They're coming, in a couple of days to take care of this, so we won't get a fine. That's exactly what you are hoping for. But otherwise, if you're going to go through the whole process, you need to understand the process that it entails, the law that allows people to sort of get out of it midway, and what happens once you've gone through the process. How can you collect the fine? What can you use it to? What tactics can you use once the fine is levied and things like that? And what are the pitfalls to be aware of? So I think we've kind of covered all that here today. So that is the end of the presentation. And Ben, if you want to start with just maybe, if you want to kind of just do some rapid fire questions, I don't think we're gonna get through all of them, but if you want to just rapid fire them at me, I'll give quick answers and we'll do as many as we can.
Yeah, so there's 75 of them. I'm going to start from the way beginning, just to give those people the respect that have been sitting around waiting. And then you say when you're done. So we are a co-op 719. How does the fining rules apply?
It's the same as the condo.
Okay. Does the HOA have the power to temporarily allow certain actions for a specified time frame without negating the right to enforce? Specific question is, can the HOA allow parking in typically non-allowable parking areas on holidays? Does this violate uniformity of enforcement of the documents?
I mean, it can, but I think those are real world exceptions that I mean, yeah, someone can argue, well, you allowed it. I would just maybe perhaps make rules and regulations that make exceptions for those holidays. And remember, you're making exceptions not for one person, but for the entire community when you're doing that. So I don't think it's that big of a deal or precedent setting, because you're not making an exception for one person specifically, but for the whole community. And yeah, most ideally, you may just want to put in your rules and regulations to codify that. So, so it's in black and white.
All right. In a condo, if there are no fining or compliance committees and there is non-compliance for lease, how can the board issue a violation and a fine?
They can't.
Okay. If it's a cleanup fee for garbage or a dog, can we just fine without warning?
No, you have to, if it's a fine for those things, there's no such thing as an automatic fine. You have to go through the process. Now, if there's an actual cost, like we've had people that crash into the gate and there's a cost, there's damage there. So in addition to fining them for, let's say, piggybacking off another car when they shouldn't have, the fine aspect has to go through the process. But if there's a bill, an invoice from the gate company for $500 to fix the gate, that can be charged immediately. But the fine still has to go, like the punishment part of that still has to go through the process.
All right. During watering restrictions, can we still fine for not keeping up your property? I'm not talking about some bad luck of care. I'm talking just totally not taking care of your property.
I mean, if it's affecting everyone, then I mean it's uniformly. But if it's someone individually, they need to find, if everyone else is irrigating their property in a way that's maintaining it, and that person's not, then and they're all under the same restrictions, then I think it's still, you can find them. I mean, I think they need to find a way to do what everyone else in that instance is seemingly able to do. Now, like I said, if it's a situation where everyone's property is being affected, then no.
Okay. Let's see. Let's go with can a board of directors fine a homeowner per parking violation? Example, $100 every time a homeowner parks on the street.
Arguably, yes.
How can you document fines for not picking up after your pets? We kind of got through that. Please send a copy of the slides. We got through that. Can I get a copy? Blah, blah, blah. Okay. Smoking is not illegal, but there are restrictions as to smoking inside the apartments. To do it in open areas should be fine. Tell me the limits to smoking. Then, is there the medical marijuana, and how does that play into smoking?
Yeah, so smoking, it's up to every building if they're going to ban smoking in common areas and units. That's up to them to decide. Whatever they have decided on, if owners violate that, they can pursue action against them. Except, with medical marijuana, if they have a medical accommodation to do it, technically they are allowed to do it, but we do write letters to those people asking them sometimes if they're smoking excessively. We'll ask them a letter, to ask them to choose, a smokeless option, or perhaps smoke outside the building, or, or use a smoke eating device or something like that. But yeah, that is sort of one thing we run into now where, an association can say no smoking, but then they have a statutory right to do so that supersedes that. It's sort of like when a governing document says no pets allowed, but then someone says, well, I have a medical necessity for my support animal, and you have to let them have that pet. So in those instances, you have to let them have the medical marijuana, but it's sort of an area that's still being navigated. There's no law on it, what's excessive and acceptable. So we usually, that's why I said we ask those people to try to be more mindful of their neighbors.
All right. Is it recommended to put multiple fines in one notice and show a total possible fine amount with an itemized breakdown, or is it better to send a separate notice per fine?
Well, yeah, I mean, if it's to one owner, you can put it all in one notice. I think, I think that's just sort of individual preference. I don't think there's one that's better than the other. I think having it all in one is perfectly fine.
Okay, a lot of these questions keep coming back with, if there's no committee, can you still fine? Is the fining committee a standing committee, or can it be organized before each hearing?
Generally a standing committee.
Okay.
I've never seen it handled as anything else.
All right. Let's see this one. The $1,000 cap for how long? Example, dogs running free someone just lets them out the door. After $1,000, no further recourse. Is it per dog, or is it per unit?
Well, every instance that they let the dog out on a leash is $100, so you can violate them every time they do it.
Okay. Can a resident?
If it's multiple dogs at one time, I don't think you can fine them for each dog. I mean, you could try it. I mean, I guess you could try it, but I would say it's per, really more incident than per animal in that example.
All right. If a violator is a renter, can the violation be against the owner? And
Yes.
would the owner have to resolve this matter? Example, parking violations.
Yeah, we usually, because the owner is the one that has a vested interest, when we have these violations and we get involved as legal counsel, we're writing to the owner because most all governing documents and the law in general makes the owner responsible for the actions of their tenants. So they're the ones we usually want to go after because they're the ones that have a vested interest.
This one's interesting. How should an association handle a complaint that another resident is harassing them or making them feel uncomfortable?
I didn't hear the first part of that. How what?
How should an association handle a complaint that another resident is harassing them or making them?
Yeah, I mean, that's not really in line with fining. So, I mean, that's just general
Right.
compliance.
That's more
I mean,
legal. Yep.
yeah, I mean, that's just more, I mean, you can fine for that if it's corroborated, but that's more one where you have to get the lawyer involved and write what we call it like a nuisance letter, type thing.
Here's a good one. I'll be selfish on this one. Can a board tell all the unit owners they have to install new hurricane impact windows and doors without taking a vote of all the unit owners?
No, there has to be no, they have to have a member vote and amend it into their documents.
All right. You got a lot of thank yous. You got a lot of amazing. Can they have copies of the slides? Great presentation. A lot of these other questions are repetitive, so
Okay, so
I'll
unless
let
you see
you.
any others that seem pretty good, we can cut it there.
Yeah.
I see
First
one,
violation.
people have the right to know who reported them for a violation. If there's a written record of it, like then yeah, that's an accessible record. Yep.
Okay. Can your management association conduct the fine? If nobody can the management association conduct the fine committee if nobody wants to serve?
No, the committee cannot, the management can't be the committee.
All right. Is your then do I need? Yeah, I mean, you want to just go through it too while I finish?
Yeah, I'm doing that.
Or-
A lot of it's a copy of the seminar. A lot of these are things we've answered in one way, shape,
Can we
or
cut off
form.
can we cut off someone's fob for the front door? There is still a Medco key that can be used.
Generally, that's like one, that's kind of like cutting off the guest access. It would be if they can still use a key. I mean, you arguably could, but I've had someone ask me in like a condo, can we turn off their, it's a condo where the elevator, you have to have a fob to get to your, to activate the elevator for your floor. And they said, well, can we turn off their fob and make them take the stairs? And I said, no, I mean, I like the idea because it's sort of like in an HOA, making them go through the guest lane. But, I guess you could just try to justify turning off the fob, but because that's a means of ingress and egress, that doorway, I don't think that would be permissible under the statute.
Okay. How do we get, we don't need that for someone who always leaves the trash again. Documentation. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the rest of them we've kind of touched on or are repetitive.
Okay.
What about a contractor who enters the HOA gate? Okay, here's a good one. What about a contractor who enters the HOA working in several homes but commits violations? Who gets the violation?
Yeah, sometimes that's a tough one. I mean, I think if it's multiple homes, they all get a violation. I think they all, if that person's attributable to multiple homes, I would send a letter to everyone. I mean, if they're doing something in the greater community that's a violation, and let's say they're visiting, 3 homes, I would send it to all of them and say, hey, your vendor, your contractor, is doing this or did this thing that was wrong, you're responsible for it. That's a little tricky to handle that. I think you just kind of use your best judgment on that one.
Dan, who decides the fine amount? Is it the board or is it the committee?
The board, the committee can only just say yes or no to whatever amount the board determined.
Okay. I mean, can the association ban a contractor due to repeated violations?
That's one that gets a little tricky too, but yeah, I mean, eventually if they should get a warning letter first. And then I would say if they don't resolve the issue, just say, hey, we're not gonna, I mean, ideally it would be a gated community where that can be controlled. But yeah, if they are constantly, we had once a landscaper that was constantly tearing up common property, being very negligent in what, when they were going to other owners' homes, the way they were parking their vehicles and things. And we sent them a letter and told them, hey, you can't, you got to be more careful. And we told them this would happen, and then they weren't more careful. So they got banned, and the gate wouldn't allow them into the community anymore.
All right, I'll give you one last one unless you want to keep going.
One last one's good.
What is the proper way legally to communicate the violation to the owner?
The proper way legally to communicate it is through the letter. The statute requires that you send a letter. It doesn't have to be certified mail, but I always recommend you send it by certified mail, regular mail, to all addresses you have on file for the owner. And if you happen to have an email address as well, send it by email as well, so they can never say, they didn't get it because you're sending it to them umpteen different ways. But it should be by a letter. And because doing it just verbally, you want a paper trail. And by statute, you have to, for the formal letters that have to go, you have to have that paper trail. So the cure, like for example, curing things and things like that, if it's just done verbally or informally or in like a text message or something, we want it done in a way that there's record keeping and professionalism and all that. So the letters are really the way to go.
All right, I'm going to, unless you want to keep going, I think it's fair that we answered a bunch of questions.
Yeah, I agree.
And I'll give you your closing remarks, and then Peggy will close us out.
Yep. So I thank everyone for listening and participating. I hope we got to all your questions, or most all of them. We're here as a resource to anyone who needs us. My information, I've had it up there now for a few minutes. You can find me on my website. If you search my name, there aren't too many Dan Wassersteins out there. So and we really go above and beyond for our clients. Like I said, anyone who knows me in the room here knows how responsive I am. It is eating away at me that I haven't, for the last hour and a half, I haven't been able to respond to my clients, but I will do so as soon as we conclude here. But that's just how I operate. So if anyone feels like your association could benefit from that, I'd be happy to talk with you. And that's it.
Okay, well, awesome. We have a lot of positive comments, Dan. Thank you so much. Everybody's saying how thorough it was, great information. You do have a few questions that I think would want to be answered in a private email. And I just want to say thank you to the board members, to the managers again, to the sponsors. I want to let you know that my next class coming up is June 12th. It's the Construction Summit. It's a Friday morning class again from 10 a.m. to 12 noon. This is a CEU class plus a panel. So if you have anything under construction, you're considering construction, this is a place to come to for construction specific questions. The attorney from Ball Janik will be there. They are specifically construction defect attorneys. So maybe that would help you in maybe other situations. I do want to mention also on June 16th, there is a day of education at the Gold Coast chapter of CAI. And you might want to put that down on your calendar. It's a complete day. Lots of good things happening there, and the announcement will come out via a flyer. I also have June 23rd, a new Coffee with the County presentation on what to do with your pets during a hurricane. It's really been informative, and I hope you can see when you get the flyer there that you can attend. And lastly, at the end of the month, on June 30th, I have Vinteum software coming in, giving a strong presentation on some of the things I mentioned today, websites, etc. But they always try to find a new topic, and I hope you can join us. So have a great weekend, everybody. It's supposed to be beautiful here in South Florida, and I really appreciate you choosing our webinar. Thank you.
Thank you.